Good evening. We're at Canadian Macedonian Place. This evening we'll be speaking with James Saunders. Today is Thursday, May the 6th, and we'll be speaking with James in English this evening. Welcome, James.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jim. Could you tell me what is your birthplace in Macedonia? What town did you come from?
I was born on 12th of July, 1923, in the village of Zelevo.
Okay. And what was your nationality? What is your nationality?
My nationality was and is Macedonian.
Okay, thank you. And what was the size of your town at that time when you were a young man?
At that period of time, I believe it was close to 2,000 people.
Okay. And what was the size of your family? Well, how many brothers and sisters that lived in within your home?
My immediate family, or
yes, when you were growing up as a child.
Well, grandfather, grandmother, two uncles. My father, three brothers, and a sister that died at an early age. I am the eldest from Saunders, my father. My grandfather's name was Georgi.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother's name was Konstantina. My mother's name was Sophie, from Nolevci, Zhelevka, from Zelevo. My father's name was Spiro. I'm the oldest of the three children. My brother Chris, my sister Sally, Sophia, who is married today to Steve Stavro from Gabrish.
Right.
And my brother is married to Helen Nakev from Trstia. And I'm married to Dorothy Mergela, born in Toronto.
And
from parents of Zelevo.
Okay, so all your grandparents, these were your grandparents on your father's side, is that
Yes.
correct? Were they all from the same village?
Yes, they were.
Okay. And what did your father do? What type of work did your father do in Zelevo?
My father's early days, he was a tile maker, what we call geramigia. The tiles that you see today, they're quite expensive. They are made out of baked tiles that cover homes, expensive homes.
Are the clay ones? Or
Clay
the
ones, that's
okay.
the ones I mean. Yeah. They were grandfather, my uncles were, in the early days, that was their trade.
So they made their living mainly from making the tiles. And did they do this work within the village, or did they go in and around Zelevo?
This is part of their livelihood, plus the fact that they were agricultural people. Villages, most villages depend on animals, sheep, goats, cattle, fields of wheat and fields of whatever, agricultural commodities. And in the later period, my father was in a cafe, which he operated in the village with his younger brother. Cafe is like a place where they meet, they play cards, and they have coffee and sweets.
And this was in the early part of, in the 1920s, would you say, or in the...
This was in the early part, yes, and right up to the period that I came over, which I came over in 1938.
Okay. And now, your home that you lived in with your grandparents and your brother and sister, was that owned by your parents or your grandparents? Was that owned, or did you pay taxes on the land?
The home that we lived was my great-grandfather's home. Then it was handed to my grandmother and my grandfather's mother, which was handed down. As far as I know, there were no taxes paid.
No, okay. What language did you speak in the village?
We spoke Macedonian in the house, within our family, and we were forced to speak the Greek language outside.
Okay, when you say outside, did that mean when you went to school, what language did you speak?
When we went to school, we were only allowed to speak Greek.
And how many schools were in your village?
In my father's time and my mother's time, there were two schools. There was a school in Slavic and there was a school in Greek. In my time, there was only a school in Greek.
So there was only one school in your period?
One school, yes.
And it was in Greek, okay. What about churches? How many churches did you have in your village?
We had two churches in our village. One was, as they tell me, in my period of time, they were both services were in Greek. But as I was told by my grandfather and my parents, that one was Slavic, spoken, the sermon was in Slavic, and the other one was in Greek.
Okay. And the teachers, could you tell me what nationality were they in your parents' period and in your period? What nationality were they? Where did they come from?
Well, there's, according to what I've been told, the teachers in my parents' time were from the area, but I don't know what background they were, because in Macedonia there is Vlasi, which you call, I don't know if you're familiar with.
Right.
There's Albanians, there were Turks, there are other nationalities. So I don't know.
So you don't know of the teachers or the end?
In my time, I know that the teachers, we had a teacher from my village that was educated in Greek, and few of them were, again, from the territory of Macedonia, which were Greek teachers.
Okay. But you would say that they were Macedonian but taught in Greek. Is that what you're saying
Yes,
to me?
yes.
Okay. And what about the priests in the church in your period?
Priests were we had two priests, both of them from the same village, from our village. They were Zhelevci.
They were Zhelevci and conducted the service in Greek.
In Greek, yes.
Okay. What other nationality?
Macedonian, we must not misunderstand each other. Macedonia wasn't allowed, so therefore they were only allowed to performing services in Greek.
Okay, but would you say that the priests and maybe your because you said they were both from Zelevo, if they were out of the church, let's say, would they speak in Macedonian to you if they saw you on the road, or would they speak to you in Greek?
Well, definitely, they were from our village.
But would they speak to you in Macedonian or in Greek?
In Macedonian, of course.
I'm just...
Of course, in Macedonia. But I mean, if it was an official an official person that or somebody outside of the village, they would speak to him in Greek.
Okay, I was just trying to clarify whether they...
To a villager, but to us kids, it was compulsory. Greek was the language.
Okay, so that the priest, if he saw you on the street, would
they
speak
would
to you.
speak to us in Greek, otherwise they would be afraid of somebody listening to them.
Okay, so it was Greek that they would
But
speak
if it was confidential or something in a home, they spoke perfect Macedonian, just maybe better than I did.
So they were really protecting, would you say, their positions in the village? Is that what you would be saying if they... I don't want to put words in your...
According to my knowledge, after 1913, denationalization of the Macedonians had begun.
Okay. Yeah. Could you tell me then, when you were growing up as a young boy, what was your daily life as you were growing up? What would you be doing in the morning before you went to school? Did you have any chores, or what would you do? Could you tell me?
Well, early in the morning, just like any other kid, even here in Canada, you get ready for school, wash yourself, and
What type of a breakfast would you have?
breakfast would be, there were no all-bran flakes or
Well, I bet.
whatever manja that was left over from the night before, or, you know, a little something, and send
So
us
it
away.
actually would be a manja, you're
Send us
saying?
away, that's right.
What type of a manja would you have?
Well, you know, whatever was available, I guess. And then you would get ready for school. You want to get yourself a piece of wood, so you take it to school, so they can heat the stove.
Oh, so you brought your own
compulsory.
heating. Oh, I see.
It was compulsory. Each kid bring a piece of wood in school, so they'll fire the stove to keep the room warm.
Okay.
Interesting.
All of this is, it is, you know, like for people that have not been
Yes.
brought up in that
Yes.
environment,
Yes.
to you it might not seem like anything, but okay. Now, as a child in the summertime, did you have school? I guess I'm not too familiar. Would you have school in the summertime?
In the summertime, no. In the summertime, we would be helping our parents
In what way?
in the fields where they would be working and harvesting and planting and reaping the harvest, or with animal out in the pastures, green pastures with the livestock, and playing as kids, normal life as anywhere else.
Okay, but you're saying normal life is everywhere else. At that time, it wasn't the same as it would be here. So that's, I'm just curious as to, like, did you play any certain types of games or?
Well, we played cleanza.
Okay,
It's
now.
called cleanza.
And what was that?
That's a piece of wood, and I don't know how to explain it. You hit it and it flips up, you know, and catch it. Bishka, another one. There's many other kind of games. There are many games that football. Football is very popular in Europe. And what else? Kids.
Okay.
What kids normally do. You were a kid.
I did different things
In
here.
that period of time, mind you, when I was growing up, there were no wars or.
Yeah.
I came here, as I said.
You were born in
1923.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and
What was your family name in Zelevo?
Sandrini.
And where does that name
That
come
derives
from?
my grandmother of my grandfather's mother, which remained in the house of her grandfather, and brought a husband into the house. A fellow with the name Mitre, Dimitri, which I carry his name. My great grandmother's husband his name was Dimitri.
Because it's an unusual name. Like, did it derive from a...
Sandra.
Where-
Alexandra, only in short, Sandra.
Okay.
So, in honor of her great-grandmother, the name derives Sandrini. And when I came to this country, I had some cousins born here, Toronto. When they registered us in school, instead of registering as Sandrini or Saunders, as we came in the passport, Sandras in Greek, Sandras. They registered our name as Saunders, S-A-U-N-D-R-S, and it remained up to date as
To the present.
present. Yeah.
Okay. What type of fruits did you have in your area? Fruit trees?
Walnuts, pears, peaches, cherries, prunes.
So you would say your area was there was good irrigation and it was excellent.
Very, very good fruit country.
What about vegetables? What type of vegetables did you grow? Do you remember as a child?
Vegetables, From potatoes to carrots, I guess, pretty well everything. Lettuce, celery, cabbage, peppers. Of course, peppers are predominant today. If you, you know, if you go through Macedonia, wherever you go, you'll find peppers hanging on their balconies, hanging on their window sills, and yeah.
Okay, and were there any stores in Zelevo?
Yes, there were.
How many stores would you say there was there?
In Zelevo, there were 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, 4 stores, 4 what you call general stores, which you could buy anything, and there were 2, 3 cafes. Cafes are where people go to relax and play cards and have a shot of whiskey or coffee. Macedonsko coffee, Litusko coffee, as they said.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and in the general store, what type of goods would be sold there?
Well, mostly things that they need immediately, like coffee, tea, sugar, things that they need in a kitchen. Like if you needed clothes, you would go to Lerin, which is a city just above the Bigla Pass, as we call it. You're familiar with the area.
I am, yeah.
You know, so that in Bigla Pass, and you go down, and you're down into Lerin. Okay.
What type of area would you say Zelevo is situated in? Is it a mountainous or plateau, or?
Zelevo is a high altitude village, which always depended on immigration. People from the early days, for their livelihood, had to go to Asia Minor, had to go to United States of America. Before that, in fact, in southern Greece and northern Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, to maintain their livelihood. Bichkiji, as we call them, cutting trees and cutting, you know, like by hand.
Right.
Kalji, carrying mortar and building homes, my study, as we call it. You're familiar with the word my study?
Yeah, my study.
Carpenters, bricklayers, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So you're saying it's mountainous. It's not. You're not in a straight on a.
It's a beautiful area. It's up high in the mountains. It's a valley, a huge valley, which runs.
Is it very picturesque?
Beautiful, beautiful area.
Is there any water around?
The river runs right through the village.
And what was the name of that river?
Goes all the way down to Dobrish.
And what was the name of that river?
You got me there. I don't know what the name is.
Okay. What is do you know what Zelevo is called now?
Antarctico.
Okay. Could you tell me your holidays, like now, for instance, Easter? What would you do at Easter time in Zelevo as a young?
The most wonderful memories in my life are Easter.
Okay, there. Explain it to me.
The red eggs. You wait from your parents to brand new shoes or brand new clothes. Beautiful weather. The weather is very nice there. Lamb, barbecue lamb. Beautiful festivities.
What type of festivities?
Dances. The tapani would go boom, boom, boom in the center of the village, and everybody would be running in the center of the village dancing and enjoying. Then afternoon church with the red eggs, chakanya, and you know, who breaks your egg, takes it where he puts it in his pocket. And many wonderful memories of Easter.
What about Christmas time?
Christmas time is a little different. Christmas time is in the winter. My memories of Christmas is pigs screaming. This is the day before Christmas where they slaughter the pigs.
Mm-hmm.
They make jubarinki and...
Right, yeah. Can you explain to us in English what jubarinki is? I know what it is, but maybe for other people, they might not know.
It's part of the bacon family, I think, and they make it into cubes. And when they melt the lard,
Mm-hmm.
they put them in the lard so they maintain life. And through the winter, very cold winter, they take them out of the lard and they heat them up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they're delicious.
Nice and crispy, aren't they?
They sure are.
Okay, so you remember you're saying the pigs screaming because they're being
The
slaughtered.
whole village. They buy them little pigs in the summer,
Mm-hmm.
and they feed them right through till Christmas, just before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
They make lukanitsi.
Right.
They make many products out of pig, out of the meat.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, festivities. Church services are beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
They people seem to flock the churches,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, Christmas is a religious holiday. So is Easter.
What was more festive, Christmas or Easter?
Well, the Christmas has different. How should I say? It's cold. There isn't the festivities in the outside as you have in Easter,
Mm-hmm.
but it is enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Food is the most important thing, I guess, and plus the fact that new things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, grandfathers and our fathers were here, but our grandfather would go to Lerin and buy us different things, shirts or different things, and we look forwards to gifts just like here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What type of food would your mother cook for the family? Your baba and your mother cook. What type of manji or
Same as any other manji, zelnici,
yeah, but every village.
borezi.
But you see, in
Yeah.
your village, you grew a lot of vegetables. In some villages, it's not that way. So you can't say it's the same because in my village, we didn't have the same things you had.
Your village is Toronto, isn't it?
It's got everything. But you understand what I'm saying? Like, what
Yes,
type of
yes.
manja would you have, basically?
Well, we would have the normal Macedonian manji from zelnici, burezi, maznici.
What kind of zelnik would you eat? With what would you your mother put into it?
Oh, it was chave. If it's summertime, they go kopri. You know kopri?
Koprivi,
You
yeah.
know what kopri is?
Oh yes, I know too. Yeah.
Chave or
I know it's
kopri,
chave,
cabbage, borilsnik rice. They make it with rice. They make it with many zelnici can be made with many
Okay,
rice.
would your mother make the zelnik all the time, or just on special occasions?
On special occasions.
Okay. And when we say special occasions, when would you say the zelnik would be made?
Well, if there was a name day, if there was christening or something, or a special occasion.
Okay. And okay, I'm sure you had both.
Then Bob is, of course, that's
Staple,
that's
yeah.
the staple.
Okay.
Bob, Lescha, Manestra.
What is manestra?
Manestra? What do you call it here? You'd have to ask my wife.
I don't know what that is.
Manestra, or macaroni or spaghetti.
Okay.
You know.
Minestrone?
Minestrone.
Okay. Okay. Did you have a doctor in the village?
No. Doctor was in Lerin.
And how far was Leding from Zelevo?
I would say about 25 kilometers.
Okay. Now, did the schools have any names to them? No names. And no.
Village school.
And what about the churches? Did they have any names?
Sveti Nikola Lozana, that I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the other one was.
Okay. Now, were these, you're saying there were 2,000 people in the village, roughly, at that time. Is that correct?
Well, you must understand that our village, Zelevo, immigration to Canada started way back in 1903, 1902, before the Bastanie,
Right.
the revolution,
Yeah.
the Ilinden. So it diminished gradually, and today, 1994, there's only about 40, 50 people in there.
But how many houses would you say? How many houses
My
were
understanding
at your
was,
time?
there were over 300 houses.
Okay. Were there any other ethnic people living in the village?
No.
They were all
Zelevci were
all
our
Macedonian.
people, our people,
no.
our own people. Well, there were a few intermarriages of Vlasi,
Oh, okay.
and but they're same religion as us.
So are you saying to me then there was no
Prosvegi?
influence of the Turkish regime in your village?
Well,
There were no mosques?
They were there for 500 years. Oh no, no mosques.
No homes, no Turkish
No.
homes?
No, but most of our grandparents spoke fluently Turkish.
Oh, okay.
No, they were there for 500 years.
Okay, that's what I'm questioning,
Yeah.
whether there was still that influence
But,
there. So your parents could speak, your
No,
grandparents a little
my
bit of...
grandparents could,
speak,
but not me, no.
at
Not
the
my parents.
Okay, at the time, what type of money was being handled in your...
Greek money.
Okay. And what were they called? What were
The
they...
drachma,
Mm-hmm.
the drachma is even today Greek drachma.
Okay, so it was a drachma, okay.
Yes.
And,
And the Turkish lira was the lira, I think.
mhm.
Lira, yeah. That's what I hear.
Okay. Now, did you have what type of the village? How was it being handled? Like, did you have a mayor or?
Of course.
Okay, so
Administration.
yes, within the village.
Yes, the administration would be. They would vote for a mayor with a committee. Treasurer, secretary, treasurer, and trustees.
Okay, and
They would have a poljak, what we call a fellow that would go around the fields and make sure that the animals don't go astray in their fields and damage their crops and all that. They would fine them if some, say, my animals or your animals went into somebody else's field. There was civil administration, I guess you would call it.
so there was some kind of organization being handled within the village, and of course these would be people within Zelevo that would be looking after all of this.
Yes, the police would be, all the police were Greek.
Okay, but would the police be in the village, or
Yes.
you would have a police station within the village?
Yes.
Okay. Your home now, how big was your home that all of your family lived in?
Our home was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rooms with a chardak, and below there would be what we call aur. It's the barn. The barn. Then there would be the plemna, which we put all the straw and hay and grain. Then they would have a coal room, what they call a little storage for barrels of cabbage and brine, lard and cheese in brine, and many things that they needed in the winter months.
Now, was this
like
A one-story house?
Storage. Two-story house.
Two-story, okay. Okay, now when you were in the village, of course you were going to school, right? Up to what grade did you go to school?
Unfortunately, I went to 5th grade.
Okay.
I wasn't able to finish public school, good public school.
And, okay, and may I ask why, or?
I had to come here.
Okay. Okay, Jim, when you were growing up in Zelevo, can you tell me, or would you like to tell me how, at what point the language was banned, Macedonian was banned, what year, and how did it happen, and how did it affect you?
Well, it affected the whole area. The whole of Macedonia was actually the western part of Macedonia. I don't know about the eastern part of Macedonia, but it affected the whole area. It was compulsory that you take your grandparents to night school, teach them the Greek language. It was compulsory to take your mother and grandmother and grandparents. It was devastating as far as I'm concerned, because memories of that was where you had to be afraid that they were listening below, and you know, and a lot of people were beaten up. In fact, when I was a kid, we were out in the pasture with kids, and the highway through our village goes through our village and goes into Albania, and there's a lot of traffic from Lerin, the village of the city of Lerin, today called Florida, goes about into the through our village and into Albania.
How far is the border?
Very far. The Albania border would be 10 kilometers.
Okay.
I think it
so that's how close it was.
I'm not really 100%. And this was a car that had passed through there. A whole bunch of kids were passed, as I said, in the green fields there with the stock animals. And I apparently ran, according to what they tell me, and yelled, "What a beautiful car in Macedonia, Shoba automobile." You know, I hadn't seen a car like that before. And the little path above the fields, the meadows, a policeman with a couple of birds on his hand and a shotgun in his arm, yelled and called me over. And as I went close to him, he slapped me once across the face and both sides of the face for no reason. I didn't know what the reason was. I asked him in Greek. I says, "Why? What for? Why?" He says, "Bulgar. You speak Bulgarian." I wasn't speaking Bulgarian. I was speaking Macedonian. This is the language, my mother's language, the language that my parents taught me. This is quite an experience. I have never forgotten that.
And how old were you at that time? What year was that?
This was around 1936. 35, 36, around there. It was quite, I'll never forget it, in fact. This is human rights. If there's human rights, I mean, why for speaking a language, it's not.
Right. So, the entire village was, or you're saying the entire western part of Macedonia felt the brunt of changing the language.
This was.
How did this come about, though? How were you told? I mean, was it written, or did somebody come around saying, "Well, no, you're not going to talk like this," or how was it brought about?
No, I don't know if there were any documents that I could point out to, but I mean, at that age, I knew that it was banned. You weren't allowed to speak Macedonian, the language that you
So
speak.
this was from mouth to mouth. People just saying.
It was very obvious that policemen would be walking on the road, and you switched right away. If you were speaking in our language, you start talking into Greek. Otherwise, they would issue a writ. You go to court, and they would fine you. This was the year of Prime Minister of Greece was
Metaxa?
Metaxa, thank you. Metaxa. Metaxa here.
So how much would the fine be for speaking?
It was in money.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was, if you resistance, if you had resisted the authorities or the police, then they would jail you.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite
severe.
Severe, yes.
Okay. Now, could you tell me about New Year's? What would happen at around in the river? Could you tell me what was that called?
You're talking of when they throw the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I just said it. Voden, yeah.
Vodici.
Vodici, that's the word, yeah. Vodici.
Okay,
Well,
could you explain to me what that was all about?
Well, this is, again, a service, baptism, I guess, the service of Christ, baptizing Christ, the priest.
And when would this be? What month, though? When would this be?
You got me there now. What month would it be? I know it's cold.
Maybe New Year's Day or something? Or?
January, yeah, yes. And we would all the congregation would move away from the church, which was in the center of the village, and go outside of the village. And now the river would be running through, the people would line up. It was kind of at an angle up, and you see, if you're standing on the other side, you see people all the way down to the road watching. Same thing when they cross the other side of the river. And the boys, usually the strong boys of the village, the hefty, the ones that are athletic, they would stand in the water up to their knees or halfway, some of them, and wait for the cross. As the priest throws the cross, they will dive into the water. Who would catch the cross, and then he would run, take it to the church. Then the ceremony, then they would allow him to take the cross from house to house and be given coins of money and food and things like that. He would be the hero of the day.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
It's very colorful. It's very something different.
Okay, so as a young boy growing up in Macedonia, what would you say your life would have been like? How would you describe your life as a young boy growing up in Macedonia in the 20s and early part of the 30s?
Well,
how did you see your life?
My life was full of happiness. It was peacetime. There were times that, as I say, with the oppression of the Greek authorities, but otherwise, with kids, we would go and steal cherries, or we'd steal apples, or mischief, play football, run after girls,
Yeah.
and many games. Yeah.
So, as a young boy, would you say you had fond memories as opposed that it was a happy life to a certain point, or did you feel that you were fulfilled as a young boy growing up in that environment?
There were times that I have good memories of the village, but there were times when there was, some death in the families or other close relatives or something, and you hear the bells ringing and funeral and things like that. That I have memories of, good times. And
how did you find the community effort in the village?
The community effort in the village, I found, in my memories, very cooperative. I remember the villagers brought water into the village, in districts of the village. Like there were 4 districts in the village, what we call Mali, Mala, and they brought it all the way from the mountain, Jorgogla they call it, all the way down to a reservoir at the top of the village, and this water would flow into the four main chisme, we call them, you know, coin in a fountain, you know, like the coin in the fountain, that idea, where the animals would drink the water in the bottom of the trough,
Right.
and the water would flow. And then in the center of the town, they'd have four of them, which water would be running all the time. In the center of then in the middle, there would be the pametnik,
A monument.
monument of who the wars that they, you know, people that fell in wars in wartime, and people working for nothing. In other words, dobrovolno, as they say, free time.
Right.
I remember my grandfather, going with my grandfather, he would be working with other people, building the trough with the tile all the way down. And it's interesting, memories that people were together. In case of fire in the village, they will all rush and help somebody. In case of something happened, bad, something, water damage or something, some lady, her husband died, people would go and help her out. People were very helpful. That's those are memories that I have of the village.
Okay. What year did you come to Canada?
April the 1st, 1938.
Okay. And did you come with your family, like your mother and father, or your sister and your brother? Or?
My father was here.
How many years had he been?
7 years before us.
Okay.
So he gathered enough money in that period of time. He paid our way here.
Who came with you?
Myself, my mother, me, my brother Chris, and my sister Sally.
Okay. And what about your grandparents?
My grandparents remained there because I had an uncle that still lived there in the village with his wife and 3 kids.
Okay. And
the younger uncle of my father's younger brother,
okay,
which got killed. He was killed in the war. I can explain that later if you want to know.
No, you can explain it to me now.
Well,
No, you can tell me what happened. Yeah.
Apparently, in the village of Zelevo, there was some kind of a misunderstanding between 2 groups of people, predominant civil administrators, and the occupation of the Italians and Germans. They occupied our village. The Italians were in our village.
What year was that?
1942.
Okay.
He was one of 7 taken to coastal area and shot by the occupiers for gathering money to help an uprising against the occupiers, which were the Germans and the Italians.
Was this a group of people together?
From the village.
From the village, I see.
Yeah.
So were they all shot, or were?
7 of them were shot. My uncle was one of them.
And they were taken to
Coastal.
And why were transported to Coastal?
This is where the port
Headquarters?
apparently was.
Oh, I see.
The Italian authorities.
How did they know that this group of people were doing this?
This is a question that's been, we're still searching to find out. Apparently my knowledge of the thing is that some people I spoke, jealousy, one group of people was against the other group, and
But didn't you just tell me that everybody was helpful?
well, they were helpful in that respect when I was there, but through the war, who knows what their interests were. And,
so it was their own people being a traitor to their own people?
Yes, apparently the village mayor signed the papers for them to take away these people, and their answer to this is that they put the gun up against his head, and that's the reason he signed. Well, if I was me, if I were the mayor of the village and they put the gun and say, shoot me, I want to take 7 lives, or close 7 homes. That's my opinion of it.
I see. But then, that was happening all over though, in every village.
Yes, there were...
There were a lot of villages like that where there
in
were...
our village in the Civil War, there were over 125, 35 young people my age that are gone.
That's right, Partizani.
Yeah, there was a village of Boof, there were 400.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, this was a terrible, terrible loss.
Exactly, because everybody was fighting against each other.
I mean, brother against brother were fighting. Some of them with the Greek army, others were
Exactly.
in the mountains with the guerrillas, with
Exactly.
the partisans.
Yeah.
We call them guerrillas here, but...
Yeah, yeah, the partisans, yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate,
Yes.
but it was happening, I think, throughout, and it happened even in the 1912, 14, and that time too. A lot of this was happening in the beginning. Okay, so you came with your parents. How did you come to Kent? By ship or by?
From Zelevo to Lerin, from Lerin to Solon.
How did you travel from Zelevo
From
to?
Zelevo to Lerin with a truck.
Would you say you were affluent in Zelevo?
How do you mean affluent?
You had money?
My family?
Yes.
No.
Were you
Survived. Nobody has money, big money.
But you know how sometimes there were some people that maybe had
Well,
a little bit more than the other
If money
person.
came from the United States,
You
or
were
Canada,
wealthy, yes, because you had somebody here.
because somebody was sending the odd check,
Yeah.
yes, things were not
A
too
little
bad.
bit better,
But
yeah.
the poor people, the people that had nobody here, it was tough life.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
you found yourself a little bit.
Well, I was fortunate because my father was here and my uncle were here, and they would send the odd check, which grandfather would cash it and buy us a few things that we needed.
Okay, so you went by car from Zelevo to Lerin. From Lerin to.
Well, it wasn't a car; it was a truck, which we sit on one side with a bench on the other. You were familiar with that?
Okay, so
And
you went to Lerin.
Lerin, we just slept overnight there, and then from there we took the train to Solon.
Okay, and from Solon.
Thessaloniki, as they say, call it. From there to then by train, right through Yugoslavia, right through Italy, right through France, into Cherbourg.
What year was that?
Le Havre or
Cherbourg. Cherbourg, maybe. Yeah.
Cherbourg, France,
What year was that?
1938.
What month was that?
We came here April the 1st,
In 1938.
1938.
Okay, and what ship did you come on?
Search me.
Okay, was it an English? Was it Italian? Was it French?
It was an English lines. I forgot.
What do you remember? What language they spoke on?
English.
Okay.
English.
When you were on the ship, okay. When you got to France, did you stay overnight there?
We stayed for a couple of nights.
Oh, a couple of nights. Okay. And
My mother was in panic over us because the traffic was, I'd never seen anything like it before. She was holding on us, oh my goodness, something dreadful. She was afraid because a lady from next to the village coming here with her 2 sons lost one of the boys, got killed in the traffic. So, you know, the word goes around, and mother was very, very scared.
Okay, I'll ask you only through my experience, because at that time they had to wear their national costumes in the village, right? I don't know about in Zelevo. They never wore dresses, the women. They never cut their hair. How did your mother?
I've got pictures of my mother and the passport. I should have brought it with me here.
Yeah.
Too bad I didn't bring it over. With her Zhelevsky costume.
Right.
Me, my brother, and my sister Sally. And she's on her passport picture with the Zhelevsky costume.
Okay, but when they traveled,
They had dresses.
they had to have dresses, am I correct?
Yes.
Did she have her hair cut at that time?
Of course.
They cut her hair, and she had to dress. Of course, The boys wear pants.
The
There's no
boys, the only
difference.
thing from Zelevo, I had the socks, those heavy woolen socks
Yeah.
that people used to make in the village.
Yeah, which would,
They were heavy.
and they
They were
scratch.
heavy. That's right.
Okay, so,
Bought us socks.
so they did have to,
Other shirt.
okay, so they did have to change their dress as they were coming, as they were leaving the village, they had to make sure that they dressed according to,
They call it the European dress then.
yeah.
The European dress, you know, like, this is the ethnic, the villages.
Mhm.
Even today, I would say, 1994, you would find in villages people wearing the old, that I've been in Europe a few times, in the villages, they wear those old shawty, as they call them.
I think it's very rarely.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, maybe. But anyhow, so they would have to change the dress and okay. Now, and of course you children not being used to traffic and big cities, what was it like,
It was like-
as for you children? I mean, how old were you?
As I said, I was 14,
And your brother was?
3 years younger.
So he was,
Sister 3 years younger than him.
so that you were all young children.
That's right.
How did you see, well, how did you feel coming into an environment
Well,
like
how
that?
would you have somebody from Africa or Middle or Far East that lived in a village or in a jungle coming into a modern society?
What was your first impression
It's-
as a young boy?
My first impression was amazement. How can things be like this? Because you never traveled from a village, you were in the village,
But not only
The
that,
only
did you not
place-
read about it?
read about it. Well, we learn in school, but reality is different than reading about it. We used to go what they call peripato, you know, from one village to another, school children. I don't know how to say it in Macedonian, napat,
Yeah.
napat,
Yeah, Napat.
to another village, you know.
Yeah.
Or Prespa, the Lake Prespa, which is right across from our village.
Yeah.
We just crossed one mountain there and you were in the village, in the Lake Prespa area. That's the experience of,
Okay, when you left Zelevo, were there other Macedonian people that traveled from your village also at that particular time?
with us, there was a lady with 2 daughters that traveled at the same time.
So that why did you leave the
And I was the
village?
water boy in the train. I'd be running and getting water in a jug, and for the girls and the mothers, my brother and sister. I was the oldest.
Okay. Now, why did you leave the village?
We came, my father, we immigrated to Canada. We
But
immigrated.
why? What was the reason behind that?
Better life.
Okay. Okay, and on the ship, were there other Macedonians?
It was terrible.
Oh, in what way
The
was?
smell. You leave a village up in the mountains, the air is so clean.
Mhm.
You get on these trains, you get on this ship, in the ocean, the oil, the smell of oil, and the motor's diesel, I guess. Eh?
Mhm.
Oh, it was terrible. But you had to bear it.
Okay. How did you find the food in the ship?
Very rich.
In what way would you say rich?
Butter and cream and all kinds of fruit, and you know, it was
What other kind of people were on the ship? What nationality?
from boat to steaks and roast beef.
I guess it was difficult to take. Okay. What other nationalities were on the ship?
Oh, there were all kinds. There were Polish. There were. I remember kids playing on the ship. They're Polish and Jewish. I guess they're just leaving at the right time. Yeah.
Jewish people at that
Jewish, yeah.
in 38.
1938. This was just before the war.
Yeah.
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 39, the war started.
Yeah.
A year later.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. How did your family find the ship? Like, how did you find? Were you sick, or how did
They
you
were
find the
sick.
people?
I was not as sick as my mother was and my
Mhm.
my sister,
Mhm.
brother. They were, you know, excuse my expression,
Mhm. Well,
yeah.
Were they, but, did you find the people friendly on the ship, like the people that served you and
Oh, they're very nice.
very,
Oh,
okay.
they're very, very pleasant, very pleasant.
How long did it take you to go from France to, where did you land?
I think it was 7 days
Where did you land?
in Halifax.
Okay. And then
And train again.
and then train
Toronto,
through?
Union Station.
Okay. And who met you at Union Station?
A fella came over and he says, "Give me your luggage." I says, "Get lost."
No, I'm sure you didn't say that because you did not know English. I'm sorry.
I said, "Що за кажете?" He says, "What do you mean?" Then I said, "Tatko, get lost." He says, "No." He looks small. My father looks small. I hadn't seen him for 7 years.
Yes, I can
He's
understand.
changed so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
He says, "I'm your father."
Okay, so what kind of passports did you people have?
Of course, Greek. What else do you have? Compulsory.
Were you all on your mother's passport?
Yes.
All the children?
Yes.
Okay. And it was Greek. And it was under the name of
Saunders.
Saunders?
Saunders.
Saunders, okay. Where did your father take you to live?
Niagara and King.
Okay. Now was it
Not
a
far
house?
from the abattoirs there. That used to be Zelevo #1 from the old country.
Niagara and Queen?
Most of them were King, south
King.
of King.
King,
Most of our people worked at the abattoirs there. Zhelevci, they're all the settlement of Zhelevci there.
what was it called?
Niagara and King.
No, the place that they worked?
The abattoirs. The abattoirs.
The abattoirs, what
Yeah.
were they?
Slaughterhouse.
The slaughterhouse. Oh, for heaven's sakes, what was it called?
The city abattoir, they call it? No, I think so.
I can't remember where Niagara and King, where does Niagara, where is that close to?
Past Bathurst.
Oh, that way, okay, I understand, okay. And was that a house that he took you to?
A house with another family from village of Ternava
Mm-hmm.
with 4 children, and us 3, 7 children,
In one house?
and 4 mothers and fathers, 4 adults, seniors. And we slept in the house had kitchen, living room downstairs, 3 bedrooms upstairs, I think. But we were all living together,
Mhm.
the kids. That's the way life was those days.
When you came to Canada, what did you do? Did you go to work or did you go to school
I
or?
went to school, I went to Niagara School
And for?
for not quite a season.
Mm-hmm.
Then my father got a job on Dundas and Church area,
Oh, doing what?
cook.
What was your father working at before when he
My
came?
father was in partnership with my uncle, and then he sold his share
In what though? Partnership in what?
in a restaurant,
What was the name of the restaurant?
Providence Lunch.
And where was that located?
Dundas and Church.
Okay. And you were selling
Church in Dundas.
on Church?
On Church in Dundas.
At the, okay.
And
Okay, and what kind of food did they sell there?
regular Canadian food.
Canadian food, no Macedonian food.
No.
Okay. So then from there, he
Then we moved on Winchester Street for a period of time. The rent was too high, so we went back and Dundas and George. Then we went to Duke of York School. In Duke of York School, I met my wife there as a kid. She was born there.
Okay.
My wife.
So how old were you there at that time at Duke of
Well,
York?
that's it. That was when I was 16-year-old.
Mm-hmm. And your father was working where at this time?
My father was still cooking for a living
Where was he?
for my uncle at the same place.
At the
Providence Lunch.
Okay. And your mother, what was she doing?
My mother was home.
how did you find living in these various places in Toronto? What kind of people were you meeting up with? What were your neighbors like?
I found the Niagara area there very ethnic, blacks and Jewish kids and black people and Jewish kids and different backgrounds, Polish, Ukrainian, mixed ethnicity, you know.
So then when you came up to...
When we came up to
Winchester,
there were Anglo.
Yes.
So it was quite an experience.
Right, and then you came down
I
to...
came down to the George and Dundas.
Dundas.
Was mixed again.
Yeah.
Mixed ethnicities, you know.
Okay.
Mixed,
So where was that your last at Dundas and George?
well, that was the until we
Dundas and George, was it?
Dundas and George, yes. Then my father went into business.
What business did he go
My
into?
father went to a restaurant business on Yonge and Girard.
And what was the name of that restaurant?
Saunders Grill,
Okay,
Saunders, Anglo name,
okay,
Grill,
right.
which we ran for a few years.
And did you work there also?
I worked with my father, yes.
And at that time, you were still at George and Dundas living?
No, we lived above. We moved away,
Oh.
we lived above the store, above the restaurant.
At,
379 Yonge Street,
okay, so you lived up there for a while?
yes.
Okay.
And then...
For how long did you live there?
we lived there for a couple of years, and then we bought a house on 346 Eglinton Avenue, in Mount Pleasant area.
Mm-hmm.
Brand new house. Father made enough money,
Mm-hmm.
$4,000. Those days, brand new home for $4,000.
Oh, and so all of you moved up there?
We moved up there. Then the building, the property that we own, my father had the restaurant in. He bought the building from Dr. Scott, which was our landlord. He used to come and pick up the rent and seeing us working all the time. Mother, everybody working.
Oh, your mother worked there too?
My mother washing dishes and all that, and my brother, my sister in the front, Sally, and kind of took liking to us. And when he died, he had in his will that we'd have the first option on the building, and my dad bought it for $7,000.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And that building today is called the Bermuda Tavern.
Yeah.
And my dad, then the building burned down, which Saunders Grill was in it, and we rebuilt the building, brand new, and we named it the Bermuda Restaurant. And when licenses were reissued in 1948 by the Drew government at the time of the Conservative government here in Ontario, my dad was fortunate to have a good friend, John Grudeff, the ex-judge.
Yes.
And in fact, he was kumo to my brother when my brother Chris got married. So through the Conservative Party, we obtained a liquor license, which was one of the first of all the Macedonians, liquor license.
Oh, yeah.
My dad did very good, very well. He did well with the business. Did very good.
And you worked with him for a number of years?
I had my ups and downs with my father, and when you're young, you know, you disagree, disagreements and all that. One time I took off for Montreal, and I wanted to join the Army, the Navy in Montreal, with a friend of mine called John Yanoff, Tommy Yanoff's first cousin. We went there, and it was in 1940, I think. I had a little argument with my father.
So you were, at that time, how old?
Well, I was in my, how old was I did that? 1940.
You probably would have been about 16 or 17.
17, 18.
Yes, yeah.
Around there, and we stayed in line all day on the Naval Academy where they were enlisting, you know. And finally we came up to the enlisting officer. He says to us, what are you guys doing here? He says, you can't even speak English properly. So
From there, we went in the Montreal shipping offices where somebody told us they are hiring merchant navy, bringing ammunition and stuff like that to Russia, to Murmansk, Russia. And we met a young Greek Canadian there, and I spoke Greek, fluently Greek. So he says, "What the heck are you guys doing here? Didn't you know what's happening in the Atlantic? Most of the ships go under, the U-boats and the So he chased us out of there. He says, "Go back to your families." He scared us, in other words.
Yeah.
And we came back and then settled down. He settled down working in a factory, piston factory, wartime ammunition, not ammunition, but pistons for motors and all that.
Oh, yes.
And I went back with my father in the restaurant industry.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm kind of going ahead of myself.
No, that's okay. No, that's not ahead at all. That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, now, what...
Of course, at those days, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
That's
I was
okay.
very political. The war made us all political. Russians were our allies, and and especially when you worked in restaurants, all the cooks and all the guys were pro, left. And the war support of the war effort, as they call it, against the Nazis, the Germans, and the Italians, and the Japanese.
So how did you, okay, so in 1940, you're talking about wartime, you're talking about depression?
Well, I've seen both.
That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
you can tell me how you felt as a Macedonian in another country trying to understand everything that's going on, and as a young man.
Well, media, the propaganda machine at the time, of course we had to fight our enemy, to keep quiet, the enemy's listening. Posters all over you. I guess you can remember that. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
Women driving buses, women driving taxis, women with kerchief working in the ammunition factories with their what do you call the women who were over their hair? Scarves and
nets and things.
what else? Tanks in front of City Hall. I remember jumping on the tanks and looking at them. You see, everything was war.
Okay.
And the economy booming. All of a sudden, all kinds of money. In the 30s, depression. It was terrible.
I was going to, because I...
Terrible. Conditions, or economic conditions were terrible. People would line up for a job. And then all of a sudden, everybody went overseas. Most of the young guys were overseas. There was all kinds of work. We couldn't find people to work in the restaurants. Then a lot of Ukrainian girls, Polish girls from the West, waitresses and all that in the restaurants came. A lot of immigrated from Western Canada to Eastern Canada here, I can remember. And things were booming. Money left and right.
For certain people.
Well, I guess you're right.
Okay, Jim, now we're talking, it's in the 40s, it's during the war. You're a young man of 17, 18 with your friends. I'm sure you met other Macedonians, other Zelevo. Could you tell me what your social life was like at that age?
Well, our social life at those days, pool rooms, playing pool.
Where would you go and play pool? Whereabouts?
Oh, there was a pool room that we used to go to, was in a church in Dundas. Macedonian people owned it.
Okay, so there was Macedonian. Do you remember the name of the pool hall?
No, I don't remember. Then we would go on Sundays at St. Cyril Methody down on the old Trinity Street.
Oh yes, Trinity.
In the hall there would be dances. Sundays. Baseball. Played baseball.
played soccer.
Did you play with Macedonians or did you play with other national?
We had Zelevo Brotherhood.
Okay.
Zelevo Brotherhood. We had the Zelevo Hall. With the Zelevo team.
Where was the Zelevo
Soccer
Hall?
On Western Road in Sinclair.
Okay, so you belong to that.
Of course.
Okay, so
It's
yeah. So you would have your own group of young men that would
Yes.
have a soccer team or a baseball, and would you play against other nationalities or?
Well, I played for the sport of it.
Mm-hmm.
My brother was more into sports. My brother Chris
Mhm.
was involved with the team.
Team,
Which
oh.
they played against. St. Cyril had a team at that time, and
Mm-hmm.
they played against each other. And other, I think it was the city teams that belong in a group.
Mm-hmm.
Organized by the town, by the city.
But, oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So they
So even during the war,
league, like a league,
yeah.
where they played against different groups, you know.
So
And,
during the war, there was some kind of social.
all kinds of social things going on through the war.
Did you
times.
did you do mostly?
Swimming out in the tank, swimming pool, they call it a tank out in Sunnyside.
Oh yes.
To go swimming there, chasing girls.
Okay.
Lots of blonde girls.
Yeah.
And swimming and dancing. Jack Evans and his Sea Breeze, was it?
Oh, I don't.
The Sea Breeze,
Yeah.
yeah. Ellie Royal.
Yeah.
Ellie
Okay.
Royal, yeah.
Okay. And did you have a car as a young man?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I had a car.
Okay. And what was the car you had?
The
What was your first car?
The first car I had was a 38 Plymouth.
Okay.
The most wonderful car in my life.
So, as a young man, you, in your 17, 18, you had a car, you were working for your father, you socialized. Would you socialize mainly with Macedonian, would you go to Macedonian dances, or would you go to...
Ukrainian dances.
Oh, okay, so
Polish
you
dances.
mixed with other national...
Polish dances.
But were your friends mostly Macedonian?
Well, yes, mostly Macedonian, but we mixed. We used to mix with Canadian kids, Van Gogh
Mhm.
background, Miss Masonic Temple,
Mm-hmm.
Columbus Hall.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And
How were you able to speak, if you went to Ukrainian hall or Polish hall, how were you able to converse?
я не понимаю по-украински. Oh, we learned Ukrainian words, but I mean, they all spoke English. They all spoke
So
English.
you learned to speak
Yeah.
English
Yes, they all
very
spoke
quickly?
English,
Okay. Okay.
We had no problem.
Okay.
Language-wise, you had no problem.
No problem. Okay. So,
One thing about Canada, you're free to speak any language. But those days, I must remember to tell you this.
mhm.
You did not speak other language on a streetcar or a bus,
And what would happen?
public transportation. This is an English country. You speak English in here.
So people would
Discriminate.
okay. You found discrimination again here.
Yeah.
So in Greece it was you don't speak Macedonian, and here you don't speak Macedonian
In public,
In
in the
public.
public transportation. I never had any problem with
on the street.
on the street.
What was
Oh,
that?
mind
Was that a law or was
Mind
that?
you even on the street, if you kind of did it, you spoke your own language, but you did it in a QT way and not out loud. Because if you did, hey, speak English. This is an English-speaking country.
Mhm.
Hey, you foreigner, go back to your country.
Mhm.
You know, that was a very normal those days. Not now.
Mhm.
They dare not say anything like that today.
No. Okay. So, your social life. How did you feel during those years as a I would say a teenager or getting into be an adult, how would you see your life in those first few years of coming to Canada and trying to blend in with the new culture, new language, new way of living?
We Macedonians seem to assimilate very easily.
Mm-hmm.
It's an unfortunate, I say it's unfortunate because we don't maintain our own cultural and identity and language. We seem to assimilate very quick. I know, I see it with my own family, my grandchildren, my young kids. We don't teach them our language as we should. And we had never had any problem with, as I grew older, I had no problem with the language. You know, and as I say, there was discrimination, but you were careful.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go back a bit.
Yeah.
When you came from Greece, what kind of money did you have?
I didn't come from Greece.
When
I
you came from Macedonia,
Geographical area, in the ancient geographical area, the area where I come from is Macedonia. It's not Greece. South of Olympus is Greece.
okay, when you came from Macedonia, what type of money did you have?
Honest?
Honest.
English, Canadian, Canadian dollars.
So your father sent you Canadian
Yes,
dollars. Okay.
yes.
Do you know how much the cost of the trip was? Roughly? For all of you? I have no idea. Okay. Now, during the 1930 and into 1945 when the war ended, what was life like in Toronto at that time? How did you see it as a young man?
It was a very happy life. As we were
As
happy.
opposed to Greece, let's say.
Well, it was, the war was quite an experience. There were a lot of losses, as we talked about it. Wars are no a terrible thing. We were very happy that the war was over.
Okay. But you, as growing up, were you touched as to what was happening over in Europe, as to how did it affect the Macedonian community?
Well,
I mean, there must
the
be
Civil
Macedonian
War,
boys.
The Civil War affected us all. As I mentioned earlier, the Civil War was a terrible, terrible devastation in our parts of, especially in our villages, our area. Because this is where the predominantly concentration of fighting was. According to what I hear, mountains were burning. They would be throwing gas, barrels of gas, and mountains, rocks would be burning. And loss of life, and plus the political oppression in Makroniso and the islands were full of political prisoners from our villages. And the oppression was terrible. This is what I hear. I wasn't there.
But he, as a young man growing up in Canada, were there not Macedonian young men that went and
Of course,
fought?
there were all kinds of Macedonian boys that fought in the Second World War.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, there were all kinds of
And
boys.
were there Zelevo?
Zelevo, a lot of Zelevo were, of course. Zelevo was one of the predominant villages here at Europe.
So, do you know personally of any?
Many of them. I was going to join the army with a friend of mine after I came back from Montreal, and I'm going home one day and I start shooting my mouth. Mom, tomorrow morning I'm going to do Louis Trentis. Louis Trentis. You know Louis Trentis? Got wounded in Belgium. And she says, what? You're going to go in the army? I said, I'm going to join the army. Well, she started crying and rolling on the floor, tearing her hair, yelling, screaming, scared the daylights out of me. She said, I'm going to take my life. No, you're not going to go. I'm not going to lose you. That was it.
Yeah.
Then I got called up.
I got called a couple of times. My dad postponed it because he had nobody to replace me in his restaurant, and I was the oldest in the family, and they extended the couple of extensions. When finally I went and I had a checkup, and I was going to put me in uniform, and the war was pretty over, and they said, "We'll call you up." That was it.
So there were a lot of Macedonians.
There were a lot of Macedonian boys. Yes. This friend of mine, Louis, got wounded in the tank war in Belgium. Louis Trenders from Zelevo, born in the village of Zelevo. They had a restaurant up on Young and City Limits, Trenter's Grill. Do you remember?
No, I don't.
On the west side, as you come up.
I think I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what year did you get married?
1945.
Okay, and you married?
Dorothy Pando Marielas.
And where did you get married?
I got married by the Father Liev of St. Cyril in Ontario Street Club.
So there was no church. Is that what you're saying to me?
That's where I got married.
The
In the
Ontario?
hall.
Okay.
There they had the little church then on Trinity,
Yes.
1945.
Right.
Okay, you remember that.
Yes, I know Trinity Street and I know Trinity
So-
Church, but Ontario Street is up.
Well, Ontario
Street
Club
is-
was the left-wing club, our brothers,
Right.
and that was the hall that my father rented, and I had the wedding there with the
But-
priest from St. Cyril Methody, which was a cousin to my mother,
Okay.
Father Eliab.
Right. Yeah.
He was a Jesuit,
Mhm.
Father Eliab. And you see, the Cold War hadn't started.
Mhm. Mhm.
We were allies then.
But I'm trying to understand. Did you get married at Trinity Street Church?
Under the Trinity Street Church, but married in the club.
In the club,
Yeah.
but the priest was from the
Yes,
church,
yes.
and you were
And
married
I
in the club,
belonged to the St. Cyril Methodist Church,
which was
Right up-
eventually built on Gerard Street.
which was eventually built on Gerard and Sackville,
Exactly.
and my father contributed to it, and all Zelevo contributed to it.
Okay.
We are the builders of Macedonian money went to that church, 99%, not Bulgarian money.
Okay, so
In Gabreshani, St. George, when they split. I guess you're familiar with that.
okay, so your father and you are a founder of
St. Clement.
St. Clement. But Sveti Kirill and Metodi, because you're saying you started it, I'm trying to understand this.
Let's finish off with St. Cyril first.
Okay.
St. Cyril Methody, or the Tersiani, Zhelevci, Ternavci, Oshimci. St. George, as you're familiar, because you're from St. George, were Gabreshani, Nevoliani, Dambeni, Kostursky Sela, as we call it, coastal area.
Right.
And at one period of time, I was in the committee, the executive committee of St. Cyril Methody.
Okay, yeah.
And
what year was that?
Under the year of 59, I believe, a couple of years, with Dr. Vasilyankov as
Right.
president, Dr. Kotsev as vice president.
Right.
I can't remember all of them now, but I can remember
That's good, yeah.
most of them. And participated in the church. We built the church. We had problems with the Bulgarians. We switched, we redid the constitution from Bulgaro-Macedonci to Macedonians and Bulgarians. We were still discriminated by the...
Why were you having a problem with that?
Well, the problem derived not from our people mostly. It derived from the head of the synod, the bishop, which was
based in New York.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, our church was paying his expenses in New York,
Mm-hmm.
plus the mortgage of the synod. And he would come and mili braća Bulgari. Čeda na delo Bulgari. Hey, delo bishop, delo vladika, nije neste Bulgar, nije sam Makedonci. Even our Ustav, the constitution has been changed to Macedonci and Bulgari.
Mm-hmm.
They insisted that we're Bulgarians. For them, we're Bulgarians. At one period of time, we had $400,000 in the bank at St. Cyril for the bingos. You probably are familiar with this. I've seen the certificates in the executive committee.
Mm-hmm.
Certificates of $400,000. That's a lot of money.
At that time, yes, it
A lot
was.
of money. We asked the priest to move the church.
Mm-hmm.
No, you can't. The bishop, excuse me.
Yeah.
Oh, tears running his eyes. You cannot do the church, this symbol here that's buried in here or something. I don't know whatever, some religious thing. Then, formation of the United Macedonians.
Oh, yeah. And what
Shall
year
I
was
go
that?
on? Shall I
Yes,
go on?
that's
Well,
perfect. Yeah.
Unless you want to ask me some other questions.
No, I can go back to asking about the family life because I think we're going on to his, which is great. And I think that goes, Jim, that goes in with your family life because if you're doing this, Dorothy is doing this with you, right? And your children are growing up as we're going along with this. Okay, so what year was United Macedonians started?
The initiative was taken in 1958.
Mm-hmm.
The organization was developed and accepted as an organization.
What was
in
the
1959.
principle of United Macedonians? What was the principle? What was the reason for the formation of United Macedonians?
The reason of forming the United Macedonians was the insult of by the right wing. You see, the times changed. Follow me.
Mm-hmm.
The McCarthy era,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
United States, the Churchill's declaration
Mhm.
of the Iron Curtain, out of a sudden from allies with Russia and the
Mm-hmm.
Eastern countries to an Iron Curtain,
Mm-hmm.
a speech in Missouri, the United States. McCarthy, witch hunt
Mm-hmm.
of all, destroyed many, many lives. Our MPO, which was at the time very patriotic, turned right-wing, developed an anti-socialist viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
The Republic of Macedonia was a communist state, oppressed
Mm-hmm.
see people out there. And they moved their politics in the church, so that we developed two groups developed in the St. Cyril.
Mm-hmm.
One, which we call a liberal group, the other one a pro-right.
Okay.
You follow?
Yes, I understand that. Mm-hmm.
Then we found there was a need to do something about the insult. People felt insulted,
Mm-hmm.
especially newcomers that were coming over, that's oppressed by the Civil War and all that, where the young people, Association of the Young People of St. Cyril was powerful, very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Alec Jigorov, Jimmy Vasov, Tommy Yanov, many, I can't remember all their names. We moved into a discussion of how we could develop an organization that would serve the interests of the people, of the people with the liberal thinking, liberal mind thinking,
Mm-hmm.
liberal-minded thinking people.
Right.
And we came to the conclusion that an organization was needed, so we formed, my father actually started this at the Revere Tavern, formed the presidents of the known brotherhoods of our area there.
Zelevo, Oshima, Trnava, Rula, Vespina, Statica, Buf, Ermensko, not beyond that. Had a meeting at the Premier Tavern and came with a decision that we have to do something to serve the needs of these people.
Okay, what were the needs of these people?
National consciousness.
And what would the organization do for national consciousness?
I'm a Macedonian, I'm not a Bulgarian.
Yeah,
I'm not
but-
a Greek.
Okay, would this be a social type of,
The United Macedonians became an organization to fulfill the need of national consciousness of the people in Toronto.
okay.
It became a charter organization,
Mhm.
United Macedonians of Canada. It appealed to St. Cyril for a priest to send to Panahida at the Ilinden picnics, which our Ilinden picnics were very successful.
Mhm.
At first, we had them on the same day as the MPO, and the MPO was battered to bits. Then they would not send us Dimov, they would not send us Iliev. They consider us a communist organization. That was the propaganda. That was the propaganda being spread by the MPO. Not all NPO people are bad people, don't get me wrong. And this is how the organization was developed. And in 1958, with the first picnic, was very successful. Then the initiative was taken to go ahead and form a constitution, and what we did. Before we did this, we sent a letter of an intent through the community, through the churches and clubs and cafes and restaurants, Macedonia restaurants, and the overwhelming appeal to the people became known to us that they wanted this. We held a meeting at the Royal Hotel. Many of the merchants came and supported. I chaired the meeting. By the way, I was, because being the president of Zelevo Aegean at the time for 3 years, they gave me the honor of having me as chairman of the first picnic. We held a meeting at the King Edward Hotel after the success of the picnic. And as the letter was sent out and the appeal was so great that we went ahead and developed the Constitution, which Peter Kondoff, Mary Kondoff, Peter Spiro Basil Tuborkovsky, I have a list of people that were involved. And in April 1959, in the King Edward Hotel, a meeting was called in the community, and the people attended this meeting. Again, I chaired the meeting as chairman. And, oh, by the way, at the Royal Hotel, Denis Stoichevsky and Tommy Yanov were one was in Macedonian taking notes, the minutes, and Tommy Yanov was taking them in English, and Denis Stoichevsky was taking them in Macedonian. Then at the King Air Hotel, when we finalized accepted the Constitution of the United Macedonians, I have all the names. I think they're in books written, the names of the people that attended. And I served the organization from 1958 up to 1965 as president of the.
Oh boy, that was nice.
It was quite a big job. The appeal again, with the church, coming back to the churches.
Yeah.
No response from St. Cyril. St. George, forget it, Mikhailov. You couldn't get near Mikhailov. The appeal to St. Cyril was not
So
doing.
in the period of 1958 to 65, what type of functions did you have?
Many functions.
In what ways, though? What
Dances, picnics every year.
It was more of
huge
a social, was it? Not
huge picnics, lectures,
based on national consciousness.
Mhm.
In our constitution, we recognize the Republic of Macedonia,
Mhm.
People's Republic of Macedonia.
Mhm.
Under the socialist system, we recognize it. For our brothers, the NPO did not recognize it. And the appeal again went sour with the priest for the Panagida, because when you're having an Indian picnic, it's based on the revolt against the Turks in 1903, and many people died in that revolt, and the Panagida is in respect to the dead.
Yeah.
And they would not, so we send a letter to the Matica Selenici in Skopje, Macedonia, in the Republic of Macedonia, which was Yugoslavia then.
Mhm.
And very warmly they accepted the invitation. They sent us not a priest, that we asked for a priest, they sent us a priest and a vladika, and a bishop. And a secretary, the bishop's name was Naun, the priest's name was Stoyanovsky, and the secretary of the delegation was Andonovsky.
Mhm.
They came and we introduced them at the Indian picnic.
And what year was
And
this?
the people, 1961, I think it was. 61 or 62. And the people, to our surprise,
Mhm.
really they accepted these people.
But they had come here. What were you going to do with the bishop and the priest?
When we invited them for Panahida. We invited a priest for
Oh, I
Panahida.
see. Okay, you invited them
He
for...
came for the Panahida. When he
Yeah.
brought the bishop with him and the secretary, we housed them at the King Edward Hotel. I must come back again.
Mhm.
We had a room for them, rooms for them at the King Edward Hotel. And the next day when we took them after the picnic, we took them
Mhm.
back, they asked me and my dad,
Mhm.
and Costa Andrews. You remember Costa Andrews, the Mercury restaurant?
Can't remember.
Yeah, anyways.
Yeah.
Bill Andrews' father,
Oh, I think
Yeah.
so, yeah.
he's a lawyer, Bill
Mhm.
Andrews.
Mhm.
And the bishop took us on the side and asked us privately that
Mhm.
for a delegation such as, this is not the proper place to be housed.
Mhm.
Because of, we have Macedonians, we have a lot of enemies.
Mhm.
And my dad volunteered his house on 346 Eglinton
Mhm.
Avenue, near Mount Pleasant. And he moved to the cottage, and a charter was issued,
Mhm.
and the lawyer that worked on the charter for our church was Victor Paskalev, Macedonian lawyer. His father was a tailor down on Queen Street years ago. Donated his services. St. Clement of Ohrid,
Mhm.
First Macedonian Church in Canada, that's what we call it, because it's a Macedonian church. What else do you want to know?
Well, no, when did you, okay, so you're saying to me that United Macedonians was formed in 1958. You were the president from 1958 to 1965. It was a social gathering,
Non-political.
non-political, and it was a need for the Macedonians, and that was your principal thought of forming. When did, why did you form St. Clement's?
Religious need.
What was wrong with St. Carolyn Methody?
It's a Bulgarian church. It's under the Bulgarian Synod.
Okay. Now, when did you start forming St. Clement?
St. Clement?
Mm-hmm. St. Clement of Ohrid.
St. Clement of Ohrid was formed in 1961 or 62, I believe.
Oh, so you
Yeah.
started, maybe...
Services we started
When was the church being built?
The church was built later, now 62.
Oh, okay, that's,
Yeah. But we started services at the Zelevo Hall.
oh, okay, that's what I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
here.
We started services at the Zelevo Hall.
Because you have the
Because the
priest.
delegation went back, but we kept the priest.
Okay, that's what I was trying to wonder, you must have kept somebody here in order to,
Kirill Stoyanovsky we kept here,
yes,
but the
bishop and
the secretary went back.
okay,
We started services at the Zelevo Hall, and from there we moved them at Thorncliffe Park at the banquet hall.
oh, yes.
Upstairs, we held them there
Mhm.
every Sunday.
In
We
61.
would carry the altar in our
Yeah.
cars or truck and assemble it there.
Yeah,
And then when we finished building the church, which we bought the grounds at Waverly Boulevard,
right.
then we started services there.
And when was that? When was that? When was the church actually built?
62, isn't it? Dates are I'm a little bit funny on dates.
Okay, so that might be right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
around there, yeah.
62 or 63, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and could you tell me who formed the committee or the board of directors of this?
The committee, the first executive of the church was, again, called, what we called the meeting, the United Methodists called the meeting, because we were the vanguard of everything that happened. And as we know, Macedonian community,
Right,
as we know it.
yeah, as you know it, yes.
And we called a meeting at Rodeo Hotel. Out of this overwhelming people that attended the meeting, they elected my father as president,
Mm-hmm.
Spiro Saunders, Costa Andrews vice president,
Mm-hmm.
first vice president, Paul Basil Tubukovsky, second vice president, Mike Neshevich, treasurer,
Mm-hmm.
Don Pappas from Zelevo, secretary,
Mm-hmm.
Jim Saunders in the trustee, Len Petrov,
Mm-hmm.
Ilya George Voinov from Zelevo, Peter Stoyanov, Neshkov, Chris Neshkov, that I can remember. This is going back some
Well,
years.
yeah, oh, of course, it's going back 30 years,
Yeah.
30 some odd years.
Yeah.
And how did you pick the name St. Clement of Oak Creek? How did you come to name the church?
I'll tell you how we came to name the church St. Clement. It's interesting that you asked. First time I've ever been asked this question. Good for you. I have an uncle that was married to my mother's sister, Yana. My mother's sister, Yana, that was
Okay.
from Ohrid.
Okay, yes.
Dmitry Glavinchev,
Mm-hmm.
Glavin. They changed the name, Glavin.
Mm-hmm.
George Glavin from St. Cyril, and two sisters. Anyways, I questioned him on, there's a lot of monasteries in Ohrid.
Ibrahim.
Ohrid is the religious center of Macedonia, is Ohrid.
Exactly.
Yeah. And he explained to me St. Clement, how old it was and the historical background of St. Clement. So when the bishop was here, my father's house, in front of the priest and the secretary, and a few other people, I suggested the proper name, and then plus the fact that St. Clement was the man that did the Kirillitsa, the St. Cyril method, developed the alphabet,
Yes.
and he was the man that finished it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that was my suggestion, and they took they accepted it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we.
So that's how you arrived at that name. Okay, Jim, we've covered quite a bit about what you've accomplished while you were you came to Canada, and what you have contributed to the Macedonian community, and how you came about to organize the United Macedonians, and St. Clement of Oakley. Now, can you tell us a bit about your family life? Can you tell me, you married Dorothy. Where did you live when you married Dorothy?
On Eglinton and Mount Pleasant area.
Okay. And were you still working in the restaurant with your father at that time in 1945?
Yes, we had the Bermuda Tavern at the time. I was slinging booze.
Okay. And was Dorothy working at that time?
My wife was taking care of my kids.
No, but you just married in 1945.
Well, she did help for a little while, but very short.
Okay, but she wasn't working though.
Well,
When you got married?
Not, no, she helped, before I got married, she worked with her father. Her father used to own the Spotlight Lunch, Queen and Sherburne.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, and and how many children do you have?
I have my daughter Carol,
Yeah.
which you know,
And,
my son Paul,
Mhm.
second, and my youngest one is Sophie.
okay, and what are their birth dates? Carol, Paul, and Sophie.
Carol is born in,
The year you can.
you should ask my wife.
That's okay.
Carol is born in 1946.
Right.
Paul is born in 1948. Sophie is born in 1957. Quite a distance from,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, and as the children were growing up, you still lived in the Eglinton and Mount Pleasant area, or did you move from there?
I lived with my first two, Carol and Paul,
Mm-hmm.
with my parents. Then I bought my own house on Davisville,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and from there I moved to Victoria Village here
Mm-hmm.
in North York.
Mm-hmm.
Sophie was born there.
And you've been there since?
And no, I moved away from there. I bought a business in Newmarket.
Oh, I see.
With my brother Chris,
Mm-hmm.
and we operated that business for about 20 years.
Oh, I see.
But I lived for about 7 years in Newmarket, and I moved back in Toronto, and I've been ever since.
Okay, and what was the name of the restaurant in Newmarket?
It was called the Compass Restaurant and Tavern in the
Okay.
Newmarket Plaza.
And as your children were growing up, did you take them to any of the Macedonian functions
All
or?
the time.
Okay.
My kids were involved in St. Cyril
Mm-hmm.
in the early days. Then they switched over to St. Clement.
Okay. And what types of food would you have eaten in or prepared? What type of food would Dorothy prepare for your children?
Zilnik with props.
Okay.
All kinds.
So they would tend to eat Macedonian food?
Macedonian foods, yeah.
So did you live in a Macedonian area, or was it, what kind of people lived around you
Well,
as you were living
most
throughout Toronto after you got married?
Most of our association was mostly with Macedonians.
But your neighbors?
Of course, your neighbors, you have no choice, whoever moves next to you. My kids went to school, they went to Victoria, on Draycott Drive and in Victoria Village here. And the oldest daughter and Paul went to the high school there in, what do you call it now? North of Victoria Park there, north of Victoria Village.
Oh, I don't know there. I don't know the high
Just
school.
before Lawrence, anyways, I put up the name. And my couple of years there, my youngest one went to York University, finished got a BA, and she a teacher. She went to teacher school. My son-in-law is a teacher, her husband.
And what nationality is
He's Macedonian, and my oldest daughter's husband is he's Macedonian.
And what is Carol's husband's name?
Chris Rappas
And what village is he from?
from Banitsa.
Okay, and Carol's? And Sophie's...
Sophie's husband is a nephew of my wife's nephew of his, Louis Rapis.
Okay, and...
Both daughters are married in the same family.
Oh, is that right? Oh, for heaven's sakes. Okay, so they're
The
same village then?
the same, both, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And Paul?
Paul is married to a Canadian girl of Scotch-German background.
Okay, and how many children does Carol have?
Carol has Jamie and Lane.
And
Both of them attending a university, York, Lane. She finished this year.
mhm.
And Jamie is finished the University of Toronto. He's at Detroit Law School.
Okay.
This is his second year.
Mhm.
And
Carol? Sophie?
Sophie has two boys,
Mhm.
1 6, 1 4.
Mhm.
Jamie and Paul.
Mhm.
They're a lot of fun. With
And-
Dedo. And my son Paul.
And they
is
call you Dedo, do they?
Dedo all the time. all the
Okay.
time.
And Paul's children?
Paul is Sasha. She calls me Dedo and calls her Baba. And every Sunday she's over at the house.
So your grandchildren call you Baba and Dedo. Now, do they
Yes.
speak Macedonian?
The little ones are trying. My daughter's teaching them different words. We'll see how far they'll get. Not that I did any well with them. My youngest one understands Macedonian, but it's very difficult for her to speak it.
Okay. Has the Macedonian influence run into your children and their children? Do you
Very
feel
much.
that they
Very
that
much.
they have
They're
the
married in
heritage
the
is there?
Macedonian church. They're married in the Macedonian church. They observe all the Macedonian holidays. They attend the Macedonian church wherever they can.
Mm-hmm.
St. Clement of Ohrid.
Okay. So you feel that along the line you have kept your Macedonian heritage, or tried to, and instill it into your children.
Yes, my oldest daughter had kids. She even took dancing with the groups in the church, in the St. Clement church.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
Pictures of them, and mind you, now they're too old. They're looking after their education, and
Right.
I try to do as much as I can, involve them in the Macedonian community.
Okay. What would be your final words as to how you feel your life has been from coming from Macedonia to Canada, and how do you feel at this point in your life? What can you actually say about your life?
At the present, my biggest political concern is the blunder of Greece in regards to the name of Macedonia in the flag, which is not needed in the Balkan. We don't need enemies. We need to get along with the Greek people, because we must understand, we Macedonians have lived with Greek people for over 80 years, and we have Nevesti, Zetoi, not that I have any, I don't have any, but others have. They're people too. And why should we have animosity? Why should we hate each other? There's no reason. I mean, our people should live freely together. They should be the best of friends. The neighbors, you have to live with your friends. It's unfortunate that this development. This disturbs me a lot. There's no need for this, and in case some tragedy, as it's happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina, happens in our area, it would be a terrible, terrible mistake. There's no need for this. I mean, the Israelites and the Palestinians are sitting down to talk. We must find a solution to this hatred, and we're developing hatred here amongst our kids in school. Greek kids against Macedonian kids. There's no need for this.
Okay, and so
And the Canadian
how
government.
do you find it? How do you see this coming about? How do you feel that this can all come about and we can have some peace?
The only way to bring things to an end is peace, to sit down and discuss the differences. The differences are not that great, really, today. The Soviet Union is not anymore. I mean, look what has been accomplished. Whoever thought Macedonia would become a republic recognized by 140 some odd countries of the United Nations? It's a reality. Even the NPO recognizes the Republic of Macedonia now.
Okay, thank you very much,
You're
Jim.
welcome. You're
Thank you. It
welcome.
was very nice talking with you, and I think I'll say it's a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, this is from the passport arriving in Canada. My mother, Sophia, myself, the upper part, my brother Chris, and below is my sister Sotira, today called Sally. Yeah, this is the oldest of my 3 children, Carol. Married today to Chris Rapis from Silo, Banica. Yes, this is my second child, Paul Saunders. Yes, this is my third child, Sophie, married to Louis Rapis. Yes, these are 5 of my grandchildren. On your right is Jamie, born in 1968. And this, to my left, this is Lane, born 71, 88, and 91.
Okay,
Both
tell me their names and then the year.
Jason and Paul, 2 brothers.
And what year were they born?
They were born, one was born, Jason was born 88, and Paul was born 91. This is Sasha, my granddaughter, my son's daughter. She was born 1989. Now here's what they look today after a few years. Lane on my right, and Jamie on my beside her. Yes, this is a plaque given to me on a special occasion of the United Macedonians, Toronto branch. This other one is the founder, one of the founders of the Canadian Restaurant Co-op, Macedonian Canadian Restaurant Co-op. And the third plaque is a plaque of recognition from the United Macedonians. This is a painting of my mother in her young days in Zelevo.
Is that the
Taken out of a picture.
traditional costume?
Traditional costume, yes, of Zelewski. Yes, this is a painting of my father in his young days, taken out of the picture by one of the Temovsky brothers, artists in Toronto, from the village of Zelevo. I asked her how old she was when this was made for her. This is a Zelewski costume made for my wife when she was a little girl by her grandmother in Zelevo and sent over here to Canada. Her name was Elena Nichova, from the village of Zelevo, as I said. And I hold it very dear, she holds it very dear, and we have it encased for the grandchildren.
In fact, the Macedonian Historical Society will be displaying it in their show very soon. Yes, this is my mother, and dressed in the Zelevo Nosia. My sister Sally beside her. Beside her is cousin Peter and Johnny, my father's brother's boys, and my brother Chris, and I'm missing for some reason.